But I think human beings better get better at the things that human beings are better at. Judgment, discretion, context, ethics, all those things. Because then we will not get beat by the robots.
Tony, thank you so much for being here on the show. I'm so grateful.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to do it.
Okay, so I've got something on my mind that I haven't been able to shake, and I really wanted to have this conversation with you. I was teaching my critical thinking class last fall semester. We were covering a unit on conspiracy theories. At the end of the 2-week unit, one student said, I think it's all true, the conspiracy theories. Like, I think it's all true. And I joked, I was like, even the lizard people? And without skipping a beat, no joke, without skipping a beat, he was like, could be. We can't disprove it. And he was dead serious. And that moment stopped me because everything felt equally possible or equally fake. And I get it, because when every video might be a deep fake, every article might be machine written, every image possibly generated, what happens when a person just shuts down and assumes it's all fake? And that is what I'm faced with now, even more so in my teaching that I'm seeing.
I'm happy to be your therapist now. Okay. Good. But I'm going to focus for a moment on two words that you used in your question: disprove and prove. Right?
Yeah.
Isn't that an interesting reversal of the way, the modus operandi that we used to have, where we would insist that people would prove things? Now we insist that people disprove things. And I think that's a really interesting, it's true, whatever I believe is true, unless you prove to me it isn't. There's an old saying, it's hard to disprove the negative of a negative, right? And in this case, you could also say it's even harder to disprove the positive of a positive, the positive of what is already in somebody's mind, what is already part of their belief system. Because again, people are now, we all know about confirmation bias, right? I believe what I believe, and you can't prove otherwise to me, because it's deeply ingrained in me. It's almost DNA. And so I think, again, as educators, as speakers, as writers, as authors, as artists, we have this incredibly new challenge. Which is at base disproving what others believe is already proven.
I think with that, there's another layer of, and I see this with my students in particular, is that people are overwhelmed or just there was a 2019 article in The Wired that talked about how, if we take the example, the issue of deep fakes, that it's starting, people don't care. It's not just, is this AI generated? It's, so what? So what if it is?
But then again, it's become, whose reality is it and whose truth is it, right?
But if we can't agree on that, like if we can't agree on truth.
That's exactly right. If we can't agree what a fact is, okay? If we can't agree that a fact is a fact and there is no alternative fact, if we can't believe the truth is truth and there is no other truth, we can't believe that reality is reality and there's no other reality, then we don't have a common belief system. We don't have frankly, we don't have common values. And if you really want to extrapolate, we don't have a common nation. Again, going back to this confirmation bias idea, I don't have to be exposed to anything that I don't already believe. All I have to do is go somewhere where somebody will confirm what I know to be in my mind.
Well, and that's where the algorithms can really play into that,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, few are the people, and you know some, I'm sure, and I know some, who go out of their way And it's work, in a sense, to go out of your way to make sure that you expose yourself to many, many viewpoints,
Yeah.
to read conservative media as well as liberal media, to to be exposed to diverse opinions, diversity, inclusion, stories that treat all these subjects. But to put it bluntly, I happen to believe I don't want to blame the American public for this, because they're kept too busy just making a living. Okay.
Yeah.
People in this country are overworked, they're overtired, and so you're asking of them to take one more layer in their day, or one more task in their day, to watch as many news networks, to go to as many news sites, to read as many newspapers, to expose themselves. They don't have time.
Yeah.
It's just that simple.
I even notice in the change in college with my students experiencing that overworked culture. And because many are in school, but they're also in a part-time or multiple part-times on top of it to pay for the tuition costs. And they, when I think back to myself in college, studying political science, it was a requirement that we had to read newspapers from all across the spectrum, and they would arrive, in the dorm, and it, or they would, or there would be special newspaper boxes that you would have to go and
Not anymore.
And not anymore. And but you would if you did not read all, the Wall Street Journal, all, the list that the weekly list that you had to read from all the different papers. Whew, you would get quizzed. You would get it was quick to find out.
Yeah. And you know what? Yeah. It was mandated in a very stick, not carrot way. In other words, you were punished if you didn't.
Yeah.
Because you would have something called, I remember in my early days of teaching journalism, I never really completely agreed with this methodology, but it became a standard part of our curriculum, where we would give pop current events quizzes. And
we had those too. You would give them, and I would have to take them. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, exactly. And it would be like you would be embarrassed. You would be. You'd walk around with the big scarlet A as opposed to the big scarlet J.
I know.
The current events quiz, right?
Definitely don't agree with that high stakes shaming kind of grade-based learning.
I don't either, but I will say that if we attempted to do that today, okay, first of all, the rebellion would be amazing. But second of all, even if somebody sort of got away with it, the results would be devastatingly bad. And I think, to put it bluntly, part of what we're going to talk about, I know, is AI. And AI, in my opinion, has just such incredible potential. The potential for good is so incredibly off the charts. But the potential to make us so lazy as citizens, as students, as teachers, as people, is equally, astronomical. So I don't know what you feel about that, but I've written this book about artificial intelligence in journalism, changing the news, which if I had my way, it would be the other way around, changing the news. But, that's part of the story too, right? I've never gotten the title for a book that I ever wanted, because what do? They use SEO, search engine optimization, to see what resonates with the largest group of people.
Yeah.
And now they don't even use focus groups. They use, AI and algorithms to figure out, what's going to get the book the biggest traction. If we think about the internet, right? People have called AI the new internet. Not even close. It's not the new internet. We thought the internet, came along fast. It was all of a sudden, it was like people were online, and we had email, blah, 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 bada boom. And AI, as we are talking, and before people hear this, it is going to be in another place.
And I think that complicates and excites things. This idea that you can fully stay on top of everything happening in AI right now, that's a myth. Like, you just can't. Because even the people deep in the trenches will tell you the pace is too fast, it's too wide, it's too global. You simply can't keep up with the amount of tech platforms being produced. And even within those tech platforms, like you said, what the AI is today is going to be different tomorrow, and so on and so on.
What we think of as AI right now is going to be considered primitive.
Oh, it is.
In about a year at the most. At the most.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, completely. And to use my one cliche of the day, it's like trying to sip from a fire hose that is shape-shifting in front of you. Like, you can't even get a hold of it, of what it's going to look like. You can't even imagine what it's going to look like. And what does that mean to be a responsible participant in a space you can't fully map?
Again, we talked about how, and I always believe this in the Socratic method, that it's more important to help people understand the important questions than to help them figure out the answers, because the answers are a shifting terrain. But historically and sociologically, culturally, the great questions remain. Long after simple answers are discovered, right?
I think we didn't fully understand what Facebook or YouTube or 4chan or these other social media platforms could become until the damage was already woven in. Right. And we're starting to learn, okay, there's a cautionary tale, to be told. And this time we know what's possible, what could be unfolding. So the question becomes, do we act in time, or do we repeat the same mistakes, with shinier tools? And what you're referencing, these, tech CEOs and founders raising the flag, especially because they've seen it in their platforms unfolding, and asking for that regulation, because I think it's a necessary route to go, because I look at what we have available, or what is emerging to be available to help us navigate the terrain, tools like detection tools, which gives us a maybe solution, not a yes or no. They're helpful, but they're really fragile. And in some cases, they've actually made things worse, flagging real images as fake and fueling that disinformation, misinformation that's not so helpful. And then there's watermarking, which is like a digital, hey, just so you know, I'm fake, baked in, a tag that's baked into the media. But that's good faith. And it's also really easy to tamper with that. And then there are the content credentials like C2PA that give you that media receipt, attached to that metadata of a video or image or text that may be edited. But there are issues with that, because that can be kind of like a nutrition label, and that can be easy to ignore when you're in a rush, and what you were saying, the overworked person, the everyday person who doesn't have time, to go through all these things. And so going from a regulation perspective and policy perspective and standard perspective makes a lot of sense, I think, to me.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think, and let's face it, my background is journalism, and journalists probably more than any other group on the planet resist regulation, rightfully so. But even journalists, I think, have come around to the idea that, sometimes regulation is necessary. Yeah. And part of that, quite honestly, I think they're afraid of their jobs. I mean, I know they are. And that's another issue. I think in many ways, not the most evil, but one of the more onerous outcomes of artificial intelligence broadly used across a spectrum of industries and organizations. If the primary motivation is to eliminate human beings from the workforce, then I think that's a real concern. And that's something we need to guard against, I think. Now, how do you guard against that? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't
I think
know.
that's one of those big questions.
Yeah.
We all could. I guess the usual way people push back. They don't watch something. They don't read something. They don't buy something. They don't go
Hmm.
somewhere.
Yeah.
But again, unless people do that en masse, I don't know that it's effective.
I'm curious about your thoughts on what is it that a person needs to know when they're keeping up with AI and they're in journalism.
Well, I think one of the few things that still stands up in journalism education and in
Hmm.
journalism practice are the basic values that journalism, since it was begun, 400 years ago,
Hmm.
um, always stood for. And that is, uh, factual, objective, ethical dissemination of needed information in a society, in a democratic society, in this case, to be American centric just for a moment, but I think it
Hmm.
applies to other cultures also, needless to say. We need to always protect those values. And
Hmm.
that's not a holier than thou, holier than thee elitist position.
Hmm.
I really truly believe that that's what separates. If human beings are really worried about their jobs in journalism, and no doubt in other fields, I think if we emotionally hijack ourselves and we self instill fear, we're not going to be open to, just right from the foundation, just right from the
Hmm.
start. We're not going to be open to learning more about something that isn't going to go away. It
Yeah.
is only going to get bigger. It's going to become a hydra, and
Hmm.
this whole thing with robots. Okay, I talk about this a little bit in the book. There has always been this innate fear,
Hmm.
somewhat through movies, television, science fiction novels.
Hmm.
This idea that the robots are coming, and they're going to take our jobs, and they're going to
Yeah.
take our world,
Yeah.
and there's going to be nothing left. There will be no humans. We'll all just be run by robots.
Hmm.
If you buy into that, then you're probably going to just go off somewhere and hide somewhere and not learn anything about what is inevitable. And ultimately, for yourself, if not
Hmm.
society, you're going to help that prophecy become true.
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
didn't attempt to understand what really it is. What do
Hmm.
human beings bring to any endeavor? I'd
Hmm.
like to believe that if we're talking about information to start with,
Yeah.
they bring discretion,
Yeah.
because they use judgment, discretion,
Yeah.
judgment, and context.
Hmm.
Now, I've seen a lot of stories written by artificial intelligence. What they are lacking that a
Hmm.
human being can provide, besides what we hope would be there in the first place, which is factual information, is they
Hmm.
lack context. Now,
Yes.
do I think that generative AI can't get to the point where it can provide context? Of course I do.
Hmm.
But I don't think we're there. I don't think it's possible that we're not going to get there. In fact, I think it's entirely possible we're going to get there. But I think human beings better get better at the things that human beings are better at:
Hmm.
judgment, discretion, context, ethics, all those things. Because then,
Yeah.
then we will not get beat by the robots.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah. But then I keep circling back to this question of just the fatigue, the information overload, the apathy, the how do you discern what is real, what's not, when we become increasingly more and more socialized with AI generated material?
If I may, I'll suggest that we're not getting socialized. Okay, we're getting the opposite of that. We're getting social mediaized. I just made up that.
Ooh, okay. A little
Yeah,
spicy.
and at least
All
once
right.
a day, in addition to using a cliche, I like to make up a new term. So, social mediaized. Um, a lot of what people we're talking a lot about AI as we should, but let's just talk about how much more social media has become, AIized, has become more artificial intelligence focused through algorithms and so forth and so on. So, people get a lot of their news. I'm not telling you, and I'm probably not telling anybody who's listening anything they don't already know, because they probably are part of that group, and we all are to some extent. A lot of people get our news from social media.
Yeah. From
We get it
TikTok, from
from TikTok.
Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Snapchat.
consider TikTok social
Yeah.
media. I think, and so I have talked to people, and it's across generations. It's not just college kids. It's people in their 40s,
Oh
their
my God,
50s.
no. My mom's sharing reels with me of news articles and things like that on Insta. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, well, this seems interesting to me. I want Allison to see this. Well, does now your mother probably does, because I know her very well. But most people will just say, well, I think Allison would be interested in this, and they probably don't even finish reading it or viewing it, but they just send it, right? And now maybe you read all of it, maybe you read some of it, maybe you glance at it, maybe you get the AI synopsis, whatever it is. And if you don't have the time or the will or the desire to delve further, that's something that's just going to be, part of your brain for the next however long, until something else comes along. The average attention span of Americans is 47 seconds. 47
Yeah.
seconds. And dropping. It ain't going up. Okay.
Yeah.
So, again, when people get quick hits like this on social media,
Wow.
that in many instances is all they're going to know about that topic, that subject, until something else comes along. And, because social media has become a reverb chamber, right? Um, when something is seen once, it seldom stays in the platform where it began. It's shared on other platforms. It's shared between friends. And actually it infiltrates so-called mainstream media.
Yeah.
I mean, if you watch the Today Show, I know some people who work at the Today Show. They wouldn't want to admit this publicly, but they go across social media to find these stories that they think will resonate with their audience. They're not, they're not going to John Hopkins' website to see the latest medical news. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
they're they're going on Facebook or TikTok or X or whatever, and hopefully they're getting some of this stuff from reputable sources. But for the most part, they're just going to social media and they're saying, oh well, look, this had so many hits. This had so many shares. Oh my God, it got 10 million shares. Yeah, I mean, I could get 10 million shares by, I don't know, standing on my head. I mean, but does that mean it has any value or any truth? Because of course I could manipulate that, because I have no way in the world I could stand on my head, but I could manipulate it that in such a way and have such a good visual that people would think, man, that old sucker could stand on his head. And I guarantee you, it would get shared 10 million times. so, uh,
Yeah.
so there's, this is such a layered thing. I think that one of the things, and I believe in, even though it's harder to believe in it these days, I want to believe still in something resembling corporate responsibility. And most of us work for somebody, right? We either have, do, we will. I think a lot of the time that we might have to allocate toward being critical thinkers could happen if we were not so overworked if we were
Mm,
not so overtired, goes back to where we began,
mm-hmm.
okay, people might actually take that time, right, to spend it more fruitfully, becoming more critical about their society, about their government, about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a possibility. But right now, I mean, I'll just take again, I'll go back to the field I know best, news media, but I also could say it, I know this firsthand in the medical world, in the scientific world. Corporations demand so much of employees.
Mm,
It used to be that you have one job and
mm-hmm.
you do that job. And when you
Mm-hmm.
finish that job, you go home.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have what we used to call rest time or relaxation
Yeah.
time. There
The
were people in
Oh, I
this
don't know what
country.
that is.
Well, yeah,
The
but
weekend. Everyone keeps talking about this weekend thing.
yeah. Well, but see, that's part of what we have accepted as a
Mm-hmm.
society. We've
Mm-hmm.
accepted it. We've accepted this idea that, I've got to be accessible at all times of the day and night.
Mm,
And if the boss calls, I've got to drop what I'm doing. And if he wants me to work, 18 hours, then I got to work 18 hours.
mm, mm-hmm.
If he wants me to, see in the case of a doctor or a nurse, if they put a quota on me that I have to see, and this happens, I have to see, 6 patients in 60 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with it, but I have to do it because it's my job. People who work in retail, if you look at any retail store, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't just run a cash register. They're expected to stock the shelves. They're
Mm-hmm.
expected to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to do inventory. They're expected to, it's not one
Mm-hmm.
job. So
Mm-hmm.
most people in America today are doing 5, 6 jobs,
Mm-hmm.
whatever they're doing. So if
Yeah.
if if corporations, if employers, this might sound like a pipe dream, but I think it could be a solution if they were willing to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Hire more people,
Mm-hmm.
take less, take more stress off of the people you have, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
they would have the time to
Mm-hmm.
become not only better citizens or better consumers, but also better workers in the long
Mm.
run. Because,
Yeah.
they'd come into work refreshed and they might actually like their jobs and they might be better at
Yeah.
them.
What an
Um,
interesting
so
take
it's
on
really
that.
hard to separate this whole conversation,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
from the world of employment.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, and I'm not suggesting it was as some people would, it was the golden age of American civilization. But once upon a time, you didn't have working couples, right? One person worked and the other person, took care of the house and the kids and all that. Again, I'm not suggesting that it was a golden age, okay, by any means. But, that had certain societal implications too. Because now you've got two people out, not just
Mm.
one per household, who are killing themselves. And when they get home, they're both dog tired. they don't
Mm-hmm.
they don't have time to read. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
time to explore, information and so forth and so on. So I'm reluctant to blame the victim, because I think to a certain extent, we are all victims of a culture that says you gotta work more, you gotta work more, you gotta do more,
Yeah.
you gotta
Yeah.
succeed, you gotta get the bigger this, you gotta get the bigger that, and so how do you say to somebody, but you know what, at 3 o'clock in the morning, don't sleep, you
Mm.
know, read all these news sources,
Yeah.
must check all of them,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes. It's a really interesting take on it. You
Yeah.
put it into the context of that it's a much more complicated situation.
Well, it's so much more nuanced too. I
It's
think
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's a nuanced conversation. I think that as Americans, and I'm not trying to make this global, and cultures, are approach everyday life differently,
Mhm.
obviously. But I
Mhm.
think Americans in general, subject to the folly of all generalizations,
Mhm.
spend far too much time working because they
Mhm.
have to. I don't
Mhm.
even think it's a choice. I think that for economic reasons, they have to.
No, I want to circle back on this topic of employment. You mentioned about in newsrooms, journalists being replaced by AI. I'm curious about, does any of that concern you? Like, do you think we could live in a world where the journalists of as we know it become increasingly replaced by a bot? Do you see that happening, or is it's going to be more complicated?
I don't see a total transition. I don't see a total transition to an all bot newsroom. Actually, if you look at the preface of the book,
Yeah.
I start out with this idea of what is a newsroom. Listen for that sound. Oh, wait, there's no sound. There used to be reporters and editors and so forth and so on. Now it's really eerily quiet. I forget my exact words. But the bottom line is that it's an exaggeration. I do think, that's an extreme. But having said that, there will be fewer jobs. Now, what I'd like to think is that, as I mentioned earlier, there will be newer jobs, not just fewer jobs. I'd also like to believe that those newer jobs will be very responsible for responsibly programming AI, okay, for news purposes, for news systems. But I also would like to believe that the human beings who remain will not be doing what we used to call cop calls, because that can be done by artificial intelligence.
What
to
are
see
cop
what
calls?
happened overnight. Cop calls are when you call the various police departments in your city to find out what happened the night before, if you're doing a morning show. We used to do them like every couple of hours. If they didn't call us with something, or we didn't learn about it otherwise, we would call. And they would say, oh, yeah, we had an arrest for a guy on this, or it was a DUI on something else, or somebody drove his car into a hospital, or, whatever. But that kind of stuff is very formulaic. You can program easily artificial intelligence. They do it already. I mean, it's not, they do. That frees up human beings to do what I'd like to believe human beings are best at. Providing all the things we talked about, the value that comes with being a human reporter, a human journalist. Context, discretion, judgment, ethics, all of the above, and a whole lot more that's folded into the human being's role in a newsroom. And so I think there's also reason to believe that one of the few areas of journalism, now doesn't this sound counterintuitive? One of the few areas of traditional journalism, and I can't truly get my head fully around this, Allison, but one of the number one thing that the public says they want more of and gravitate toward, long form journalism. Long form journalism. Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how could that be when we have this idea that everybody's getting their news from Facebook and TikTok and X and everything? Yeah. Well, maybe our research isn't necessarily correct.
Interesting.
It's a good counterpoint, though, isn't it? Because long form journalism really still has a big place in people's lives. And a growing place, a growing space. I look at the newspapers and the news organizations that have fallen by the wayside, but more importantly, I've looked at the ones that have survived. How have they survived? The Wall Street Journal, as far as I know, is the only news organization that has successfully implemented a paywall. People will pay for the Wall Street Journal. Well, let's go back again. What is the Wall Street Journal really good at? Long-form journalism. Can AI bots do long-form journalism? I suppose. I don't believe they could do it very well right now, but I would never say they can't or they couldn't. But again, how would they do that? I think there's always going to have to be a human presence. I think those who, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, I think that those who embrace the technology rather than fear it are going to become the big players in our newsrooms. And just as those who embraced the internet became big players in not just in our newsrooms, but in corporations and organizations everywhere. I just as those who, embrace social media instead of running from it, they brought value to the job. And I think no matter what it is you do in life, if you bring value to what you do, then you're going to be safe. Because there are certain things that you will bring value to that no AI algorithm can bring.
Yeah, I say, I say to my students that when they're working on a group project, and I say, you want to get to a place where you make yourself irreplaceable. Yeah. You are valuable in that group project. And that it's a way to talk about.
It's hard to do, though.
It's hard to do, but I'm like, because my students will kind of point fingers on who's supposed to be doing the task, or I'm waiting for, so-and-so to tell me what to do, and, those kind of things. And I go, to succeed in whatever career you're going for, you need to make yourself irreplaceable and valuable.
It's always been hard to do, but I think it's harder now. I think there are so many, economic factors working against people today.
Yeah, I agree.
Being secure in their jobs. One of the hopes, I think, is that the leadership in many newsrooms are young, diverse people. Right. They're diverse across the spectrum. So, I think the responsible, I want to believe that the responsible implementation and innovation in AI in our newsrooms is going to be led by those people. Storytelling is timeless. Storytelling is important. We all tell each other stories every day. Stories are important to generations of us. They're important to our culture, to our society, to our history, to our very soul of our being. So I think if something with AI can enhance the storytelling and not just add another layer of frosting, so to speak, then I think we're in a good place. But don't use it just to use it. It's about the story, or it should be. It's about the story. And if something doesn't enhance the story, the understanding of the story, and the engagement with the story, we shouldn't be using it. And I'm not a technophobe. I got technology everywhere. But I don't use it if I can, just on a personal level, if I can pick up my phone and call somebody, and that's a more appropriate way than saying, okay, why don't we just Zoom together? It's like, it's, but we've kind of lost that connection. Unfortunately, technology has become the go-to instead of the backup, or instead of the discretionary tool. It's become the go-to tool. How are we going to do this with technology? Is there always a need to do it with technology? Maybe not. Maybe sometimes doing it, in a non-technological way creates a better outcome. But that again requires somebody with judgment to say, you know what, today we're not going to do it that way because it doesn't call for it.
Yeah.
Make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you, Tony, so much.
You're very welcome.